This is a video about the Velodrome session that we did in Carson, and it's pretty technical. You know, this testing stuff is, well, I guess it's not super technical, but it's technical for me. And I'm learning a lot. I'm trying to be as thorough as I can because I do truly believe that if you believe you have the most power, and I believe I'm on par with having the most power as anyone else in the game, then you have the most to gain by expressing that power and by becoming more aerodynamic. So I'm trying to learn and be as thorough as I can so that I can hopefully get back onto the world stage, because right now, you know, we're a little ways off, and so we've got work to do. So we went to the Carson Velodrome, I believe it was the third week of October, and this was our second testing session. Our first one was with Mark Gravelin. That one was outside. We made a video about it. This one was with High Sice and Jonas from High Sice, and this is who Canyon works with, and they have worked with many of the greats who have rode Canyon bikes, and so I think Jonas has tested over 600 athletes, so very knowledgeable, very thorough, very open-minded. It was fun to, you know, chat and to learn and to bounce ideas off of. I know that the closer you get to the limits, the harder it is to find anything. So this time coming to the Velodrome, we wanted to be extremely thorough, and if we found nothing, that's totally fine, as long as we did a lot of tests and analysis and it was very thorough. And that's what we did. And so we standardized the testing procedure as best as we could. The runs in the Velodrome typically are around 4 kilometers. I targeted a power output of 360 to 370 watts because that's what I believe I can do in a 70.3. That was a big confound in previous testing. We were testing at a wattage that you could sustain, and I just don't think that that's apples to apples. You can't be doing your testing at 280 and thinking that when you go and push 360 and you go 5 kilometers an hour faster, that it's apples to apples. And so that was a major difference. So the runs are 4 kilometers at 360 to 370. I was doing those runs in under 5 minutes because I was traveling at 48 kilometers to 49 kilometers an hour during those runs. And we wanted to make sure we were always on the same page. So I would get up to speed, feel comfortable, and then I would say to Jonas, next lap. And then he knew that he would start the analysis in the software, the Alpha Mantis software, and I would then go for basically, it's 250 meters, the track. I would go for 16 laps, and then that would be the end, and they would ring the bell or whistle, and that would be the end of that particular run. So over the course of 2 days, we were on the track for about 8 hours, and we were able to accomplish 21 runs in that time, how I just said we standardized them. So first and foremost, we wanted to, so Jonas did some fit work. Ivan was there too. Ivan O'Gorman was there as well. Jonas, I just switched after the outdoor testing. I switched back to the ISM saddle, and I was sitting like extreme on the tip of it with actually a lot of phases in the pedal stroke where I actually wasn't even applying pressure to the saddle. So that was kind of fascinating. We did some work with pressure maps on the saddle and then also in the shoes. And so the first thing we wanted to test was moving the saddle a bit more under me so that there was more like of the groin on the saddle and thus less of time where I was off the saddle. And so everything was the same for the most part from where we left off in our outdoor testing, other than that the saddle had moved forward. I believe it was about 3 or 4 centimeters. So we ran that first run and we got a baseline, and the baseline came out to 0.232. So now if you recall, if you watched that video outdoors, before the wind picked up, we were sitting at a CDA of about 0.212. That's 20 watts different. But the major talking point here is that to compare absolute CDAs is extremely difficult because there's so many variables that go in that all you need to do is literally change a number and suddenly the CDA looks different. And one of those is rolling resistance, for instance. So, you know, we did the initial outdoor testing on a fairly rough road, so we had a fairly high rolling resistance versus in the Velodrome, Jonas had quite an ambitious rolling resistance in. And so I went back and actually looked at where we had done our previous testing at that same velodrome. And so the rolling resistance initially was at 0.2, so a CRR of 0.2. And then after analyzing our previous testings, we adjusted it to 0.3, so at least we could do comparative analysis between previous sessions at the velodrome. So once we did that, so now we basically did the whole first day testing difference extremes. We started at 0.232, then we went back exactly to the position that we tested outside, and so that meant putting the saddle back about 4 centimeters, and we went down to about 0.228. So, we were about 0.16 off of where we ended up in the outdoor testing, but once again, it's difficult to compare absolute values. Then we spent the rest of the day testing extremes of position. We went for more reach, more saddle setback, more saddle forward, flat hands, higher hands. We tested all of these things, and literally the differentials were 0.231, 0.230, 0.230, 0.229, 0.228. So there was virtually no change in all of the extremes of position. The biggest change that we observed was where my saddle was, actually putting it a bit behind, approximately 8 centimeters behind bottom bracket. That was really the only thing that seemed to have a meaningful change in my CDA. And that's extremely fascinating. In fact, Jonas found that quite fascinating because he'd never really seen someone who you could do that extreme, hands high, hands medium, hands low, short, medium, long, and it have no effect. But then to change the saddle, that had an effect. That had approximately a 4 or 5 watt positive impact. So that was day one. Admittedly, we all went for dinner that night. We were all quite frustrated, and I think this highlights the tedious and frustrating nature of testing if you want it to be thorough. Of course, if you don't want to be thorough, I'm sure you can easily find 20 watts, but I don't want to find 20 watts and in my brain say, okay, you found 20 watts, and then go to the race and you have the same outcome, right? I want to actually find 20 watts. And so it was like we tested high hands, middle hands, low hands, a lot of reach, medium reach, not a lot of reach. What more are you going to, there's not really a ton more to test. So we were all kind of scratching our heads. What the heck are we going to do tomorrow? We still have another 4 hours of track time tomorrow. So the next day, that's when we adjusted the rolling resistance. So at least the numbers came down to closer to our outdoor numbers. So we re-baselined, but we actually started with completely flat hands because we were going to start from there. And we came in at 0.227. And then we, once again, messed around with more of these things. We just wanted to be more and more thorough because we were a little bit worried that maybe something was wrong. How could you test all of these extremes and not have a positive effect? So eventually we landed on a part that allowed me to get more reach, and we set the saddle back to about 5.5 centimeters behind bottom bracket, and that resulted in our fastest runs, which was a CDA of 0.219. So not too far off. You have to remember, and this is really the talking point, and this is, I won't say we were frustrated, but I would say that this session actually raised more questions than answers, because I asked Jonas, who he's tested, 600 people, many of the great people to ride canyon bikes. And I said, so first off, I had asked someone with a CDA where I started, 0.227, what would you grade that in the modern triathlon game and the professional level? And he said 3 or 4 out of 10. So, okay, so my CDA is quite poor, not top level, that's for sure, a long way off. So then I thought, well, then does that mean that these people, that all these guys with better CDAs, that must mean that they're testing at 50, 52 kilometers an hour? They must be. And he said, no, they're not testing at that speed because you're pushing more power. And so it really actually was validating for me because, my last run I did at 49 kilometers an hour at my race pace, 360 something watts, and I was going 49 kilometers an hour. So it validated to me that something is happening outside when A, the wind picks up, and B, there are technicalities. And so that really was our conclusion. This was really fascinating. We learned a lot in the sense of in low yaw, and by low yaw, that means low wind, 0 to 4 degrees or so is what the wind angle is because you're traveling so quickly inside the velodrome. There is no wind though. It's an effective wind. In those conditions, I can basically do whatever I want for the most part. There seems to be my hands can be low, my hands can be high, whatever. And that makes sense to me because I did a velodrome 1 hour Canadian record, and I just totally made the position up, and it was quite fast. I don't think I pushed that much power, and I'm not a great track rider, and I was able to go 51 kilometers an hour. And so something is happening when we go outside. So it really raised the question then of, okay, all of these things seem to hold when there is low wind. And a lot of my testing I have done was on courses that have a fair amount of climbing and early in the morning when the wind is quite low. But what seems to happen in the races where I go a lot faster and there's a lot less climbing, something I'm doing is having a negative effect on my speed. And so really this opened, a whole host of questions. We just didn't have the parts last time in our outdoor testing to test all these extremes of position. Then we spent a lot of the time analyzing just what I had been doing because we wanted to get a real good baseline outside of what I had been doing. So now we need to go out and do it again. We need to go out. We need to test the extremes of position outside at certainly greater yaw angles, because it seems like when my hands go up and when I shorten the front end, when I outside in higher yaw, that I go quite slow, or I am slowed down disproportionately. And so it was quite validating actually, because when there is no wind and no technicality, i.e. going in a circle, I'm riding really well. I could have that day on a tri-bike with certainty broke 50 kilometers for an hour with certainty. And so, that's good. What it means is, once again, we go back to, if you believe you have the most power, then you have the most to gain. And so there's still so much more to do. This is the tedious nature. This is kind of the frustrating nature. This is probably the reason why I have neglected to do this. So we are going to go outside again, probably the end of November, do another 3 days of outdoor testing with Mark. And then we'll have a whole bunch of data with that. As a team, Canyon, myself, Highsice, Mark, and Ivan, we will then construct where do we test next. But we're going to go and do it in the wind tunnel. So then we'll go to Germany, test in the wind tunnel. We should hopefully by then starting to get a good picture, hopefully moving in the right direction of, at least with training set at 0.210, so that when we put the disc wheel on and everything, we'll go under 0.200. And then what we have from the wind tunnel, we'll once again, it always has to be validated outside, because at the end of the day, that's where you race. And so then we'll go back outside, and that'll probably occur sometime in end of January or February. And hopefully by then we will, be ready to come out of hibernation and express a 0.200 or better position within 360 watts.